What is up, guys? This is your boy Mike. This is your boy Corbin.
What's going on,
And
guys?
we're going to start a little bit of a series right now where we're going to talk about Peter's life.
That's right.
We're going to do something a little different, hence the table and, our trademark Town South mug, over brand. What up? We're going to do something a little different, and we're going to try to make this more of like a conversational piece rather than like something where we're standing in front of the camera and just talking at you guys. We kind of want this to be more interactive between us and for you guys. So with that, we're also going to do this really cool thing at the end where we're going to try and answer some of those deep theological or even personal questions that you guys might have for us. And we'll get more onto that later, but for now, let's just go ahead and get started with Peter. And we're going to start with the story before the story. So this is before Jesus even comes into Peter's life.
So Peter, right? His name was originally Simon, right? A lot of people would call him Simon instead of Peter. And he was a fisherman. He was that dude, right? Like that everyday dude that liked to grind, work hard, try to make money, and make his living off being a fisherman. And his brother, Andrew, was also a fisherman. And the cool thing is, what we learn is that they're from a small village that actually Jesus goes and hangs out in eventually, and called Bethsaida. And Peter, we can kind of gather that he had a family, like that he's probably married, right? Maybe even had some offspring running around.
Dude, imagine that life.
Right? Yeah. So I can actually imagine that life, right? And he was probably familiar with the guy who set up Jesus, right? John the Baptist prepared the way for Jesus. You can read about that in the Gospels too. We probably won't get too much into John the Baptist that much.
Not really.
But so you can read about that though. But like Peter, just like you and I, if you're watching this podcast, just like Mike, before Jesus came into his life, was a sinful man, right? Like he was an everyday Joe that was trying to live for God, but then the struggle's real sometimes and difficult. And so that's kind of a little bit about Peter and who he is, where he came from. So
yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And so what we can kind of gather, Mike, right, is that fishermen were hard workers, right? Still are today, but even more so back then. Things were even probably more challenging. You're using nets, not fishing poles, and you're reeling them in by hand most likely, right? And so you're using your willpower to bring in these heavy loads of fish, or you're wasting your day and not catching anything, right? And we read about that in the gospel, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't always about catching the biggest fish all the time with them. These guys are probably just, I don't know how to the best way to say it, but they're probably not even middle class, right? They're probably just a little bit below middle class.
Yeah.
Would you say that? And so they weren't probably the finest dressed or had the nicest stuff. But we know that Peter was strong-willed, right? We learned that through his story, and a lot of us can relate to that. Like he was hard-headed, strong-willed. He was going to speak his mind. And you probably learned that by being a fisherman, right? Like he gained that from somebody and probably being on a boat, right? And fishing and getting into that life.
He's a real man's man.
A man's man. Yeah, I like that. He wasn't rich. He was probably below middle class, just an average dude trying to live his life the best he could and provide for his family, which I can respect that.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, so.
A lot. So for instance, fishing was very different back then. Well, it kind of is the same, but also a little different. Fishing was a full-on economy of its own. If you weren't a licensed fisherman, which means you paid taxes, had a lot of income to where you can afford this license, you could not go to the best fishing spots. And that's where we can kind of just assume Peter's at, given that it's mainly just him and his brother on the boat, or him and his brother are the ones fishing at the time. He wasn't a really well done dude. He didn't have a license, so he could not go to the best fishing spots, and that's why fishing was so hard for him. There are a lot of times in the Bible where you see him just struggling, not catch a single thing all day. And other fishermen like him would also be in the same boat. Well, there would be days on end where they would just cast their nets and absolutely nothing would come in. And they had little control over the actual fees and taxes. It was an the economy of fishing at the time was hugely based on exploitation. the rich got richer and the poor got even poorer. And this would be Peter and Andrew. They were constantly struggling when it came to like their economic situation.
Yeah, and you can't imagine just how hard it was, right? Like how difficult it was. It's probably an everyday like hustle, everyday grind, trying to make enough to provide, right? And so, especially if you couldn't, like you're saying, go to the good fishing spots, right? Like you had to go to the not good fishing spots and still try to do, like everything was kind of against them in this situation, right? And so I just like, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the TV show, The Chosen? Have you seen anything they've done?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I haven't seen the actual thing
and
yet.
so what I've liked in the very first episode, they're following Jesus, but more so the followers, the chosen, the people that he picked, right? And obviously you meet Simon right away, and they depict him as kind of exactly the way you're talking about him. But they're in the situation, the story, when he's low on money, he like would go fight. All right, like he would be an underground fighter. I guess not underground. They were out in just the middle of the street, I guess, really, in the most show. But I just like the way they depicted it because it shows, like, he's going to do what he got to do to make some money. And in the show, he's fighting this big dude that looks like he can't take, but, small guys. Yeah, all right. And so... yeah, Peter's me. Peter's me. So I love his personality, the way that they depict himself, and that it just fits his personality, right? His anger, the way that the Gospels depict him and his personality and such. I get this guy. So
leave it up to Corbin to find a way to talk about Peter and get an ego boost at the same exact time.
You're welcome.
So Peter and his brother Andrew were followers of this guy called John the Baptist, and we talked about him a little bit a couple minutes ago, but he was like the guy who was the forerunner of Jesus. He was preparing everybody, saying the Messiah is coming. And this is the guy that Peter and Andrew were followers of. So imagine it like your youth minister and students. Peter and Andrew were very much like you guys in their boat. And because of that, we can also put together a couple ideas. They were not the best guys, like when it came to their spirituality. You can say that when they were in front of John the Baptist, they were living double lives. Hang out one way, and then the second they leave John the Baptist and go back to fishing, it's right back to cussing, right back to losing their temper, going crazy, sinning all the time. And that's pretty much how they would have lived their life before Jesus entered the picture. And like, this is the moment right here where most students can relate with Peter, because he lives such a double life. And when you would get to talk about him before Jesus, there's a lot of people who should be able to resonate with him. I do personally, or at least my younger self can really resonate with him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's just, a lot of people, I feel like, once they understand who he is and where he's coming from, I feel like he's easy to relate to and understand. It helps you appreciate the gospel and the story even more, I think. So that's cool. And so it's just interesting. So there was one day where Peter and his crew, probably his brother Andrew, were out trying to fish, doing what they do. It was, wake up early in the morning, maybe even fish at night sometimes.
Yeah, dude.
Working on zero sleep. Most of you students can relate to that, right? And out of nowhere, this guy comes up to him, named Jesus, right? And he just says, "Follow me." Right? Like that's crazy, right? So what was it about this Jesus dude that caused someone like Peter, we're talking about the pride that he had and the attitude and the temper and those things. He said, "Follow me," that caused Simon, Peter, and his brother Andrew to just want to immediately stop what they're doing, leave their life that they've poured so much energy, effort into, and follow Jesus.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, it's just crazy. At this point, was really just a stranger to them, right? And so, I don't know. It's pretty crazy.
Dude.
So,
and along those lines, it's not just their like effort and like heart and soul that they poured into this. Like, this is their livelihood. Like, fishing at the time took a lot of money to pull off. They constantly had to keep up with their gear, keep rebuying nets and all those crazy things.
Yep.
Like, this was not only just like a heart and soul issue, this was an economic issue for them.
Absolutely.
That they just left everything behind.
To follow Jesus, which, I don't know, that's powerful. And so it kind of makes me just think of, like, where are we at in this picture? Like, how do we relate to Peter's story? And so, I don't know, that's just crazy. It's crazy to think about, and I'm excited to dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah, dude. But before we do, we're going to take a good chance to find a stopping point. We think this is awesome, right where Jesus says those words, follow me. Next week, or next episode, whenever it gets put out, we'll continue to look at Peter's life, starting at the point where Peter hears Jesus say those two words, follow me. And we're going to look at see what type of answers we can come up with to answer that question of what makes Jesus that attractive, that two fishermen would leave their entire lives behind just to follow a complete stranger.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So, that's a tough question. And speaking of questions, a while back, it is kind of how we'll end this episode, I guess, right? Is we just put it on social media, Instagram. If students had any questions they just have never asked a pastor or a minister, the youth minister, not just us, but anybody that's in this kind of situation. And we had some people hit us up in our DMs and say, okay, why did you do this? And so the first one we got was, why did we go into ministry? And that relates so well to what we're talking about today, because Peter left his life and followed Jesus, and kind of get into ministry and dedicating your life to that is kind of saying the same thing, right? Like, I have my own goals and ambitions. I have my list, but I'm willing to tear it apart, rip it in half, and make whatever going God's list on my list now. And so, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, dude. So before I wanted to be a minister, I wanted to be either a fighter pilot or a pararescue, because both of those jobs seem super interesting to me. And plus, if I, wanted to do that, then military life, your paycheck is good. I would have been financially set for life, based off retirement and all that good stuff. But in my high school career, some point in there, I went to a CIY event, and this guy called John Snoots, that y'all probably already know, just pulled me and a couple friends aside and said, y'all have some really good ministry potential, and I want you guys to take the week to pray, read, meditate, do anything you can to figure out an answer to this question. What do you really want to do with your life? And I took that to heart. I would even take his keys in the middle of the night to sneak outside when everybody's asleep and supposed to be inside, and I would just go pray, read, and just really think. And out of nowhere, it just was like a light bulb that popped into my head that John hadn't taken so much out of his life just to pour into me. And one of the main things that I really wanted to do with my life was just be that to somebody else. And the best way I knew how was to be a youth minister. And so since then, I've been doing everything I can to make that new dream a reality, because I want to be somebody else's quote-unquote John Snoots and be somebody else's Jesus. And that's what we're all called to do. But this is just the way that I found that I could probably do it the best, and I could do it to the most people, because all I really want to do with my life is just show somebody love. And that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so I just like the realness is like, yeah, it's possible that you could become a follower of Jesus by yourself. But just like Peter's story, and then, your story, talking about how John influenced you and just challenged your thinking and what you wanted to do with your life.
Yeah.
It's the same thing Jesus did to Peter and so many people in the Gospels. And so I just love that. I love how that is showing, like, Jesus said, follow me through John Snoots to you.
Yeah.
In a way, right? And so that's cool. So thanks for sharing that. And so, Matt, I love that, and I'm cool with, I want to hear their stories. And so maybe if you're cool and want to share it, type it out, make a video, send it to us, text it to us, whatever. I think that would be cool to hear your story.
All right, guys, so that's it for this episode. Keep tuned in for the next one. We want to hear more from you guys. Send us in your story if you are willing. And keep in mind these questions, guys. They're really awesome. We love answering them. please keep sending it to us, because maybe we'll get a chance to answer it in the next video or the video after, or we'll probably we could contact you personally and answer it in the best way that we possibly can. We want to help you guys. We want to be the best that we can for y'all.
Yep.
So please keep giving us feedback. We'd love it, even though sometimes it may hurt our little feelings. But other than that, you guys are awesome. Peace out, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out, people.